The first thing people usually noticed about Dr. Ramona Ellis wasn't her gray suit or the way she carried herself. It was the silence she brought with her, the kind of quiet that comes from knowing exactly who you are and never needing to prove it. At 62, Ramona had long learned the art of saying very little and still commanding a room. And this morning, as she walked across the polished tarmac at Charles de Gaulle Airport toward a private Skylux jet, she said nothing at all. She didn't need to. The crew had already loaded her single black leather briefcase. She'd declined the town car, preferring instead to walk the short distance under the soft Parisian morning light. Her heels clicked softly against the pavement, her pace steady but unhurried. Today's flight was bound for Zurich, a quick hop just under 90 minutes. She was scheduled to deliver the closing keynote at the WHO's annual Global Health Conference, where leaders from every continent were gathering to finalize a $72 million, zero-cents collaborative initiative on diagnostic tech deployment across underserved regions. Her company, Ellis Global Diagnostics, was leading the charge. The plane, a Gulfstream G800, gleamed like new chrome beneath the sun. Ramona offered the crew a polite nod and stepped on board. Inside, the cabin was as she expected, sleek, whisper quiet, and empty aside from a single flight attendant adjusting glassware in the galley. Only 8 seats, all facing each other with generous spacing and walnut accents. The air held the faint scent of eucalyptus and leather. Classical piano played low in the background. Discreet luxury. Nothing loud, nothing showy. She made her way to seat 2A, the forward window seat on the left-hand side, directly across from the galley. She'd specifically requested it when the itinerary was booked. It offered the best natural lighting, crucial for reviewing the data slides she would present later that evening. Ramona placed her briefcase beside her and gently lowered herself into the plush leather seat. She opened her tablet, tapped in her passcode, and began scrolling through her notes. There was peace in the air, controlled, quiet efficiency. Just the way she liked it. From behind her, a soft voice broke the calm. "Dr. Ellis, welcome aboard. May I bring you a glass of still or sparkling?" Ramona looked up to see the flight attendant, young, well-groomed, a nervous smile on her face. Her name tag read, Jessica. "Still, please, no lemon." "Yes, ma'am." Ramona offered a slight nod and returned her attention to the screen. Lines of code, diagnostic flowcharts, clinical trial data. She'd been up since 4 a.m. analyzing them. She wanted to make sure she spoke precisely, not to impress, but to make the most of the 15 minutes she'd been given on stage. Because if she was going to stand in front of the most powerful public health organizations in the world, she wasn't going to talk at them. She was going to move them. Outside the window, a luggage cart buzzed past. Her mind moved ahead to the speaking hall in Zurich, the meeting afterward with WHO leadership, the journalists, the post-conference press briefing. She made a mental note to remind her assistant to reschedule the interview with The Lancet. She'd asked to delay it until after she could confirm the partnership numbers. She sipped the water when Jessica brought it. Just the right temperature. No lemon. Everything in that moment was exactly in place. And yet, somewhere deep in her, past the polished layers of CEO composure and professional calm, there was a flicker she'd grown accustomed to over the years. Not fear, not paranoia, just awareness. A soft, persistent question she never entirely escaped. Will today be the day I'm reminded, again, that some people don't care who I am once they see what I look like? She pushed the thought aside. This was a chartered executive flight. The guest list was cleared, protocols were precise. There was no room for that kind of nonsense here. At least, that's what she told herself. Until she heard the voice. It came from the steps outside the aircraft, followed by the sharp click of expensive heels and the casual scuff of a designer tote dragging across the floor. "Oh, I always sit there." Ramona didn't look up right away, but she heard the voice. Young, white, entitled. American accent, though trained in London finishing school airs. Clarissa Holtz. Ramona knew the name. She'd seen it briefly in the manifest. A PR executive for Skylux, supposedly hitching a ride to Zurich for a press event unrelated to the WHO conference. Ramona kept her eyes on her screen. It didn't matter. She had the seat. She had the assignment. She had the clearance. And no one was going to take that from her. Not again. Not today. When the heavy door slid shut with that soft hiss, the cabin fell into its usual hush, broken only by the gentle hum of pressurization. Ramona didn't look up. She'd learned years ago that if you didn't visibly acknowledge entitlement, it tended to lose its power. Instead, she kept her focus on the tablet in her lap, scrolling through the final slide of her WHO presentation. A few seconds later, the tap of heels echoed down the aisle. Ramona registered the sound without lifting her gaze. It was that precise, staccato rhythm that telegraphed confidence, maybe even arrogance. The designer leather bag that followed carried a name Ramona recognized. Clarissa Holtz, Skylux's own PR director. She'd paid extra for this charter and expected all the perks, including, apparently, someone else's seat. Jessica, the flight attendant, caught Ramona's eye and offered a polite but strained smile as Clarissa approached. "Good morning, Dr. Ellis," she said. "We have a bit of a situation. Ms. Holtz has requested seat 2A due to her sensitivity to cabin pressure fluctuations. Would you mind moving to 5D? Ramona lifted her head then, slowly, deliberately, and studied Jessica's face. No tremor in her voice, no defensiveness in her posture, just an even nod. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "but I specifically requested seat 2A for the lighting and table space. I need to review my charts before landing." Jessica's smile faltered and she glanced toward the galley, where a second attendant hovered. The implicit message was clear. A VIP said she wants that seat, but etiquette demanded she phrase it as a request. "I understand, ma'am," Jessica said. "However, Ms. Holtz is here on urgent business. It would mean a great deal if you could accommodate her." Ramona pressed her lips together, serene on the surface but simmering inside. She saved her response until Jessica released her gaze. "I'm afraid I can't," she said. "This is my assigned seat. I'll stay here." At that moment, Clarissa swept in, her eyes narrowing when she saw Ramona still seated. "Excuse me," she said, voice laced with faux sweetness. "I'm Clarissa Holtz. I always sit in 2A on this route. It's my preferred position." Ramona tilted her chin slightly, meeting Clarissa's stare before glancing back at Jessica. "Believe me, I understand preference," she said quietly. "But I booked this flight early. I paid in full for this seat, and I'm a platinum member too." She held up her membership card, and for a heartbeat, Clarissa's composure flickered. The cabin grew taut with tension. A banker in a pinstripe suit to Ramona's right shifted in his seat. A tech executive across the aisle discreetly angled his phone toward the window's reflection, recording the exchange. Ramona sat perfectly still, as if she were part of the seat itself. The silence pressed against Clarissa's carefully applied lipstick. "Well," Clarissa said, tapping her watch. The gesture looked rehearsed, as though someone had coached her on how to telegraph impatience. "I have an important call before landing. I really can't sit anywhere else." Ramona took a measured breath and closed her tablet. "Then I'm afraid there's nothing I can do for you," she replied. No anger leached into her tone, just the clarity of a fact. Clarissa's jaw clenched. Jessica bit her lip. The other passengers sat forward, sensing the clash of wills. Without another word, Ramona reached for her briefcase. She buckled her seatbelt, zipped her bag, and stood. Her movements were smooth, almost rehearsed. "I can use seat 5D, she said. "Thank you." Then she stepped into the aisle, compact but commanding in that carbon fiber frame. A hush spread through the cabin as all eyes followed her to her new spot. Some faces held admiration, others confusion. Ramona settled into 5D with the same composure she'd shown in 2A. The transition was complete. No drama beyond her leaving a vacancy behind. Clarissa slipped into 2A, her expression carefully neutral. "Thank you, Dr. Ellis," Jessica said, offering a tray of bottled water that Clarissa accepted without looking at Ramona. The tension rippled through the cabin like a silent current. Ramona glanced around. A few heads turned in her direction, curiosity flickering in the passengers' eyes. She returned to her tablet, but her mind had shifted gears. Inside, a familiar tide rose, a blend of indignation and resolve she'd known all too well. Not fury, exactly, but a steely reminder that politeness didn't equate to weakness. She was, after all, a woman who had built a $3,100,000,000 zero-cents company from scratch. She'd coded algorithms that saved lives, and she wasn't about to let someone else's sense of entitlement rewrite her story. Her breath remained even as she tapped her phone on airplane mode, opening the ClearDeck Oversight app. With one thumb, she bookmarked the seating data. With another, she drafted a silent alert. Passenger displacement. Code C19. She didn't need to watch the cabin to know where Jessica and Clarissa were standing. The system would take it from there. Ramona looked back down at the chart she'd been reviewing. She'd practiced these slides dozens of times, but the moment felt infinitely more significant now. Not because of the data on her screen, but because of what it represented. Equal treatment, accountability, and the quiet power of standing one's ground. The seatbelt sign blinked off. The engines rose in pitch as the jet taxied for takeoff. Jessica and the other attendant moved down the aisle, picking up the service pace. Glasses tinkled. Passengers exchanged glances over their phones, but in that controlled hum of first-class luxury, one thing was already changing: the narrative. And it wasn't about who sat where anymore. It was about who decided. The cabin settled into a gentle lull after takeoff, soft overhead lights glowing like distant stars. Ramona returned to her tablet, but her focus fractured at the edge of her awareness. A whisper, low enough not to carry, but loud enough for her to catch. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. "Some people just don't know their place," Clarissa murmured, loud enough for the two passengers beside her. No matter how sharp their suit is. Ramona's breath stilled. She felt the sting of those words, an echo of 1,000 moments where civility masked contempt. Around her, fellow travelers shifted in their seats. A businessman in a navy blazer glanced at Ramona's profile, then looked away, lips pressed in mild discomfort. No one spoke up. No one offered a courtesy apology or challenged Clarissa's presumptuous tone. She remembered a gala in Geneva 5 years ago, when a board member had sneered the same sentiment under the guise of "just kidding." She recalled the heat rising in her chest, the temptation to snap back, to break decorum with a sharp retort. But she'd learned long ago, there was power in control, in invisibly absorbing the insult, storing it like a ledger entry against future reckoning. Instead of reacting, Ramona inhaled slowly. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, feeling the familiar weight of her own dignity resting in her shoulders. She straightened her spine, pressing her palms against the armrests. The click of seatbelt straps and the rustle of a magazine turning cut through the silence like distant thunder. All around her, polite first-class routine continued. Champagne poured, screens glowed with soft news tickers. Yet beneath that veneer, the cabin was a microcosm of society's hidden fault lines. A young woman seated 2 rows back leaned forward, curiosity coloring her expression. Her lips parted as if to protest or offer support, but she closed her mouth and sank back into her seat, phone cradled in her hand. Another passenger tapped his screen, eyes flicking between Ramona and the moving map of the jet's path on his tablet. He lingered on her name in the manifest, then swiped away, perhaps weighing whether to reach out. Ramona opened her eyes and met Clarissa's gaze in the reflection of the window. There was no triumph in her stare, only calm certainty. She bowed her head and returned to her chart, drilling down into the data points with deliberate precision. She let the numbers anchor her, each statistic a reminder of the lives saved and the breakthroughs achieved under her leadership. Her mind cataloged the slight as evidence. Time-stamped, context noted, a quiet indictment of entitlement disguised as courtesy. Stillness settled back into the cabin, but Ramona felt the tension humming beneath the surface. She tapped her tablet, no action yet, just a placeholder in her mind. Later, she would activate the clear deck protocol. Later, justice would arrive at cruising altitude, powered by silent authority and a single keystroke. For now, she reviewed her final slide, adjusting the font size and realigning a data table. Outside, the Alps gleamed in the morning sun. Inside, Ramona Ellis sat unshaken, a solitary beacon of composed strength amid a sea of polite indifference. She was used to being underestimated. Very soon, they would learn how far that mistake could go. The first-class cabin had settled into the soft rhythm of cruise altitude. Light filtered through oval windows, painting gentle stripes of dawn across Ramona's face. She sat in seat 5D now, her briefcase stowed securely on the shelf above, and allowed herself a moment to breathe. The data slides on her tablet glowed softly, but she resisted the urge to dive back in. Something else required her focus. Ramona glanced towards seat 2A, now occupied by Clarissa Holtz. The PR director lounged comfortably, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. Jessica and the other attendant moved past, attending to water refills and warming towels with polite efficiency. The cabin's hum felt deceptively peaceful. But Ramona knew better. Beneath the veneer of uniform service lay a network of human judgments and unspoken assumptions. She tapped her tablet's screen one last time, saving the chart she'd just reviewed. Then she slid it shut and set it aside. Reaching into the inside pocket of her blazer, she withdrew her smartphone, an encrypted device issued by ClearDeck Oversight. It looked unremarkable, a matte black slab void of logos or flashy trim. Only those who knew would recognize it. She switched it to airplane mode, a flick of her thumb and index finger. Her movements were deliberate but unhurried, a testament to decades of practice. Decades spent turning tension into strategy. The cabin lights dimmed slightly for a service trolley, and she waited for the glow to settle before opening the ClearDeck app. The interface was spare. A single search bar, one button labeled Report Incident, and a numeric keypad beneath. She tapped Report Incident, and the keypad lit up. On the screen, a small prompt read, CSS, Sao Chepchin Shua, Incident Code. Ramona's thumb hovered over the display briefly. Code C19. It signified displacement of valid passenger for non-safety reasons. A calm voice in her head reminded her this was the threshold for immediate review and potentially locked-down protocol. She entered C19, then typed in a short description, her thumbs moving with practiced precision. As code Sao Chep Chinswa 2A greater than 5D shift, forced on valid platinum member. VIP entitlement overrode booking protocol. Time chap 7:42 CE. She tapped submit. A subtle vibration confirmed the report was sent. No on-screen fanfare, no confirmation pop-up. The system was designed to silently alert the ClearDeck command center without tipping off the cabin crew that a complaint had been lodged. It respected the principle of justice in stealth. Ramona slid the phone back into her pocket. Her heart rate barely moved. She settled back into her seat and reopened her tablet, this time to the landing checklist for her presentation, but her mind floated above the numbers. In a moment, a cascade of actions would unfold. Encrypted signals would trigger an audible alert in the galley, warnings would ripple through the cockpit, and the chain of command would shift, but none of that would be visible to anyone here, at least not yet. The cabin remained unremarkable. Champagne flutes tinkled, soft jazz spilled from the overhead speakers, and a light breeze from the ventilation system brushed against the passengers' necks. The Gulfstream's engines purred at a steady whisper. It was exactly the kind of environment that lulled people into complacency, an environment Ramona had chosen precisely because its comfort masked the undercurrents she intended to expose. She leaned forward, tapping lightly on her tablet as if nothing had changed. She reviewed the slide showing the proposed rollout of portable diagnostic kiosks to rural clinics. She adjusted a bullet point. She glanced out the window at the clouds drifting below. She didn't look at Clarissa. She didn't need to. The message had been sent. 10 minutes passed. She felt the first thread of anticipation coil in her stomach. Not fear. No, this was something she welcomed. It was like preparing for a piano recital she'd practiced 1,000 times. She'd sent her note. Now she awaited the response. In the galley, Jessica glanced up as an amber light blinked above the service panel. It was a light she'd never seen before. She hesitated, then ducked inside to investigate. Behind the curtain, the light blinked again, faster now. Jessica frowned, tugging the panel open with a curious glance over her shoulder. She found a code on a digital display. UML, Sauchepchin Sewer. Incident, C-19. Oversight Command Center notified. Response etiquette 5 minutes. Her breath caught. She knew what C-19 meant. She'd studied the protocol manual earlier that week. Any time that code appeared, a full review was imminent. A hush fell over her. She straightened her posture as if bracing for bad news, but she didn't know whose news it would be. Back in her seat, Ramona watched Jessica's small silhouette through the opening of the curtain. She allowed herself a slight nod of acknowledgement. Everything was proceeding as planned. At the forward cabin bulkhead, a red phone in use icon flicked to life. Captain Reynolds exchanged a worried look with his first officer. The cockpit door clicked open, and the captain's head peeked out. The door closed almost immediately, but the damage was done. Something unusual was in motion. Passengers noticed. The banker in the blazer leaned forward, whispering to his neighbor. The tech executive tapped his screen, expanding the manifest view and noticing a new icon beside Ramona's name, a tiny exclamation point. He frowned, as if trying to decide whether to mention it to the person next to him, then tapped his phone and started typing. Ramona took a breath. She didn't glance up. She didn't even adjust her posture. She simply returned her attention to the tablet's screen, calmly scrolling through her speaker notes. Underneath the business-as-usual veneer, adrenaline sparked quietly in her veins. She had done her part. Now, she would let the protocol do its work. The next chapter of this flight was already writing itself, an unseen hand guiding every subsequent move. Ramona reflected on how often people underestimated silence. They assumed that without words, there was no power. They believed authority needed a voice loud enough for the world to hear. But she, better than most, knew that silence could pack the loudest punch. And when that punch landed, it would echo far beyond this cabin, beyond the walls of first class, beyond the tarmac, all the way to the heart of Charles de Gaulle Airport itself. In that moment, Ramona Ellis closed her eyes and allowed herself just a single silent smile. The cabin's soft hum returns after Jessica ducks behind the galley curtain, but something feels off. Passengers settle into their screens and champagne flutes, yet there's a subtle undercurrent, like a guitar string plucked out of tune. Ramona senses it first, an almost imperceptible shift in the air. She glances up from her tablet, catching a flicker of movement in Jessica's shoulders as the attendant steps back into view. A single amber light blinks on the service panel above, a light that had never seen before. Jessica exhales, her professional mask momentarily slipping. She shares a quick, uneasy look with the second attendant, Miguel, who's carefully polishing wine glasses at the front. "Did you see that?" she whispers, voice low enough that only Miguel can hear. He nods, eyes widening. "That's the C-19 alert," he says under his breath. "It flags any time a valid passenger is displaced for non-safety reasons. Protocol says we investigate immediately." Jessica forces a nod and straightens her shoulders, but her heart races. Clarissa, perched in 2A, glances up from her phone. "What's going on?" she asks in a clipped tone. Miguel offers a polite, "Nothing to worry about, ma'am. Just a routine systems check." Clarissa narrows her eyes, lips pressed in a tight line. "Well, it's distracting," she huffs, waving a hand. "Keep it quiet, please." Jessica bites her lip, torn between following procedure and placating her view. She looks to Ramona, seated a row back, serene as ever, and hesitates. Clarissa's glare snaps her back into action. Across the aisle, a businessman in a navy suit glances up from his laptop. He notices the amber light and leans closer to his colleague. "You see that?" he murmurs, but the colleague shrugs and focuses on the in-flight map. 2 seats down, a young woman in a floral scarf frowns at the screen above the bar. Her finger hovers over the record button on her phone. Ramona spots her curiosity and gives a brief, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement before returning her gaze to her tablet. That nod feels like a pact. They both know something unexpected is unfolding. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds pauses mid-adjustment of the throttles. His co-pilot watches the door ajar and raises an eyebrow. The red call-in-use light flickers at their feet. They exchange a quick, wordless glance, an unspoken question of, "Did you authorize that?" before the captain steps out, phone in hand. For a moment, the cabin's back wall stands silent. Then the door slides shut, and the captain returns to his station with a grave expression no passenger sees. Ramona senses the tension coil tighter. She taps her phone discreetly, confirming the C-19 report went through. She doesn't feel triumph, only the calm satisfaction of a plan unfolding. She scrolls her speaker notes but doesn't read. Instead, she watches the dance of staff and passengers, Jessica standing a fraction too close to Clarissa, Miguel stealing another worried glance at the service panel, the banker fidgeting with his lapel microphone. Everyone is on edge, though none would admit it. The amber light blinks again, slower now, as if hesitating. Miguel clears his throat and approaches Jessica, passing her a folded piece of paper. She opens it and reads quickly, her eyes flicking toward Ramona's seat. Then she squares her shoulders, pulls herself upright, and walks with deliberate steps down the aisle. The tension trails her like a cloak. Passengers crane their necks, phones discreetly raised. Clarissa stiffened, shifting in her seat, but doesn't look back. Ramona meets Jessica's gaze as the flight attendant approaches her. Jessica leans in, voice soft. "Dr. Ellis, there's been an official alert. We may have to pause service." Ramona inclines her head. "Understood," she replies, calm and clear. Her tone carries no accusation, only the authority of someone used to being heard. She reaches into her satchel, closes her tablet, and stands as if preparing to stretch her legs. The other passengers watch, breath held, caught between intrigue and dread. The engines continue their steady drone, but for the first time, the cabin feels alive with anticipation. Every polished surface, every hushed whisper, every blinking light points to a moment of reckoning. Ramona steps into the aisle, secure in her knowledge that the real action has only just begun. The undercurrent she felt has risen to a ripple. Soon, it will become a wave, and by then, the cabin will be anything but quiet. 14 minutes after Ramona submitted her silent report, the cabin lights dim for a routine service round. The Gulf Stream settles into a near-silent hum, and most passengers lean back, trusting the luxury cocoon to carry them smoothly to Zurich. But then, without warning, the discreet LED panel above the bar flickers bright blue. A hush falls. Jessica freezes mid-step, towel in hand. Miguel, the second attendant, pauses with a glass in mid-air. Passengers lean forward, eyes widening. At the forward bulkhead, a small camera-equipped screen meant for flight announcements blinks on. The logo reads, Clear Deck HQ, the same agency Ramona had quietly notified. "Good morning," a crisp female voice says from the screen. It carries the precise cadence of someone who delivers uncompromising news for a living. "This is Director Ingrid Malhotra of Clear Deck Oversight." Ramona looks up calmly. Her heart rate ticks upward, not from fear, but from the satisfaction of seeing her plan in motion. She adjusts her posture so her profile is perfectly visible to the screen. The other passengers, however, jostle in their seats, trying to glimpse the speaker through the reflection of their own screens. Director Malhotra continues, "We have received an incident report, code C19, indicating that a valid platinum passenger was displaced for non-safety reasons. Under Protocol 7.4, this flight is now under immediate review." Clarissa Holtz in seat 2A stiffens. Her phone drops onto her lap with a dull thud. She looks at the screen as if it were a venomous serpent. "Review?" she mutters. Malhotra's image fills the entire display. "Furthermore," she says, her tone crisp as winter air, "the passenger in question, Dr. Ramona Ellis, is a C-level executive advisor to this protocol system, with authority to enact lockdown protocol at any point. Effective immediately, the original crew roster is suspended. The cabin reacts like a struck chord. A lawyer in a charcoal suit blinks rapidly, as though trying to clear his vision. A middle-aged woman in a silk scarf presses a tissue to her mouth. Jessica's hand flies to her chest, her knuckles paling. Miguel slips behind the curtain again, clearly rattled. Malhotra's voice resonates. "Please remain seated. Crew members identified on this flight will report to the forward galley within the next 3 minutes for debriefing. New crew will be deployed from our standby team." She glances off-screen. "Captain Reynolds, are you prepared to comply?" The cockpit door slides open. Captain James Reynolds' head appears in the frame. His uniform is impeccable, but his expression is taut. He inclines his head. "Yes, Director Malhotra. We are proceeding with protocol." As his helmeted voice echoes back across the cabin, Ramona watches Clarissa's face drain of color. The woman who moments ago lounged in 2A now looks like a student caught cheating on a final exam. Passengers exchange stunned glances. Some pull out their phones, others simply gape. Ramona leans back, closing her eyes for a heartbeat. This is the moment she's been sculpting, when silence ripples outward and transforms into undeniable truth. She opens her eyes, letting her gaze find Clarissa's again. No anger, just serene authority. Jessica reappears at the curtain, gathering her composure. She steps into the aisle, voice trembling. "Ms. Holtz, please follow me to the galley." Clarissa rises mechanically, shoulders hunched. She steadies herself by gripping the armrest, then steps gingerly toward the back, her designer tote slipping from one arm to the other. Passengers watch with held breath. The banker half rises, whispering to his companion, "I think she's being escorted off." The companion shakes a head, mouth agape. Ramona allows a small, almost imperceptible nod, an acknowledgement not of triumph, but of justice served. She returns her attention to the screen as Director Malhotra wraps up. "Thank you for your cooperation. We will now proceed under lockdown protocol for the next 2 hours. Thank you, Dr. Ellis, for upholding the standards we all aspire to." Malhotra's image fades, replaced by a plain protocol-engaged message blinking in red and white. The cabin lights gradually brighten back to normal, but the atmosphere has irreversibly shifted. Miguel emerges from the galley delivering fresh towels with a stiff smile. Jessica refills water glasses with trembling hands. Clarissa stands at the forward bulkhead, shoulders slumped, eyes locked on the floor. Ramona returns to her tablet, but the familiar glow of the screen feels secondary now. She watches as a brand new crew member slides into the flight attendant role, quiet, efficient, untainted by prior bias. A new attendant offers Ramona a glass of water. She accepts with the same courtesy as before, as if nothing out of the ordinary has happened. Yet, everyone knows that something extraordinary has occurred. The hum of the engines feels charged, as if the plane itself carries an electric tension forward. Passengers whisper in hushed tones, "Did you see that? She really did it." "That was Dr. Ellis?" Ramona feels a soft swell of vindication, tempered by her habitual reserve. She never sought spectacle, only fairness. She taps her phone one more time, confirming the protocol status. Then, with composure intact, she reopens her speaker notes, ready to transform her next slide into a call for global health equity. Beyond the windows, the Alps grow closer, sunlight sharpening their peaks. Inside the cabin, a quiet revolution has taken place. Power wielded without fanfare, justice delivered without violence. It's the kind of moment Karma Telltale's viewers live for. A moment where the underdog stands tall and the entitled face the consequences, all executed with dignity and finesse. Ramona leans back and breathes in. She knows that once this flight lands, the story will ripple across media outlets, social networks, and boardroom floors worldwide. For now, though, she simply relaxes into her seat, allowing the soft click of the seatbelt sign to lull her back into business mode. After all, she still has a keynote to deliver, and nothing, not even privilege weaponized against her, can derail that mission. The Gulfstream's landing gear retracted with a soft whoosh as the jet departed the runway and taxied toward the private terminal at Geneva Airport. Passengers exchanged polite nods, settling back into their seats for the short taxi. The cabin lights were warm, the air conditioning gentle. Everything appeared routine until the heavy sound of new footsteps echoed from the aisle. Jessica glanced back first, her eyes widening. Ramona felt it too, a shift in energy. From the galley emerged a man in a tailored dark suit, his lapel pin bearing the unmistakable emblem of ClearDeck Oversight's security division. His expression was neutral, professional, as he scanned the cabin. Ramona straightened imperceptibly in her seat. She'd never met this operative face to face, but she recognized the protocol. This was the moment Code C-19 went fully live. "Miss Clarissa Holtz," the operative announced, voice calm yet resonant enough for everyone to hear. He held a sleek tablet, scrolling briefly before looking up again. "Please accompany me to the forward section for an administrative review." A hush fell. Clarissa froze, her phone slipping from her fingers. She stared at the man's polished shoes for a heartbeat, then looked up, and the realization hit her. "Review?" she repeated, voice trembling. "I'm a platinum member. I always fly 2A. What is this about?" The operative tapped the tablet screen once. "You were seated in 2A20A after requesting that Dr. Ellis, a valid platinum passenger, vacate her assigned seat. Under Clear Deck Protocol 7.4b, we do not allow anyone to use personal influence to alter standardized seating arrangements." His tone was respectful but unyielding. No room for negotiation. A whisper ran through the cabin. The banker in the navy blazer tilted his head toward his neighbor, eyebrows raised. The woman in the silk scarf gasped softly. A tech executive half rose, tablet in hand, as if ready to record. Clarissa's face flushed. She glanced at Ramona with a pleading look, but Ramona remained composed, her gaze steady and inscrutable. "Dr. Ellis," the operative continued, shifting his attention for a moment to Ramona's seat. "Thank you for your report. Protocol is now engaged." He nodded formally, then turned back to Clarissa. "Ms. Holtz, please gather your belongings and step into the aisle." Clarissa stood, hands shaking as she zipped her designer tote. The mannequin-perfect composure she'd worn moments ago had dissolved. She brushed past Miguel, who offered a sympathetic but helpless glance. As she moved down the aisle, passengers leaned forward, phones lifted surreptitiously, capturing the moment of her expulsion. Ramona watched in silence, the corners of her lips lifting in a faint, composed smile. She'd seen countless cases of bias, the backhanded compliments, the polite dismissals, the unspoken barriers, but she'd never felt satisfaction like this before. Not vengeance exactly, but vindication. A quiet assertion that respect was earned, not granted by default. At the front, Clarissa paused, her voice barely more than a whisper. "This isn't fair. You can't do this to me. I have connections." The operative met her eyes evenly. "Fairness is defined by policy, Ms. Holtz, not by privilege." He extended his arm courteously toward the galley curtain, where a private corner had been set up for further questioning. Passengers began to murmur among themselves. Did she just say connections? I can't believe she got booted off. That was so satisfying. The cabin's undercurrent of tension gave way to a ripple of schadenfreude, quiet but widespread. Ramona leaned back, her posture unchanging. She closed her eyes briefly, reflecting on how seamlessly the system had worked. One silent report, one discreet protocol, and now a public reckoning. No raised voices, no heated confrontation. Just the clear authority of established rules. The operative gave Clarissa one last nod before she stepped behind the curtain. Jessica emerged to escort her, maintaining professional courtesy but clearly relieved that she no longer had to hide her discomfort. Miguel watched Ramona with newfound respect, his earlier anxiety replaced by a sense of solidarity. As the cabin returned to a low murmur, a new flight attendant appeared at the galley door, one of the standby crew introduced earlier. She moved down the aisle, offering bottled water and warm towels to the remaining passengers. Her presence signaled that service would resume, but everyone knew the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Ramona's gaze drifted back to the window. The Alps, freshly dusted with snow, stretched out below. The plane turned toward the hangar, engines humming with steady confidence. She opened her tablet again, but the data slides flickered momentarily as passengers whispered and exchanged glances. A silver-haired man 2 rows back tapped his menu. "Young lady," he said to the attendant, "tell the pilot to thank that mysterious passenger for enforcing good manners." The attendant smiled politely. "Yes, sir." Ramona allowed herself a soft, almost imperceptible nod. She didn't need applause. The ripple of acknowledgement across the cavern was enough. This was more than a personal victory. It was a statement. Equality upheld through quiet power. As the plane came to a gentle stop, the cabin doors slid open and the cool air of Geneva drifted in. Cleared for disembarkation, passengers gathered their things, but no one hurried. They paused as they passed Ramona's seat, offering nods or whispered words of admiration. Ramona packed her briefcase with deliberate calm, aware that the real work awaited her on the ground. She stood, smoothing her blazer, and offered one final gracious nod to the crew and passengers. No fanfare, no grand exit, just the steady grace of a leader who let policy speak louder than privilege. Ramona stepped into the aisle, leaving behind an atmosphere forever changed. The jet bridges welcomed her to the terminal, where the afternoon sun glinted off the glass walls. Ahead lay the WHO conference, cameras, and the press. But in that moment, she carried a silent triumph with her. The knowledge that even in the most refined environments, true justice could take flight. The cabin's hum had settled into an almost comfortable lull when the ripple hit. It started quietly, a subtle exchange of glances and a soft murmur that seemed to rise up from rows of leather seats. Ramona looked up from her tablet as if she were merely adjusting her posture, calm, composed, yet inside she felt the shift like an electric current. Across the aisle, the banker in the navy pinstripe had leaned forward, his eyes focused not on his ledger but on her. His mouth moved in a slight smile of recognition, and he dipped his head in a brief, respectful nod. Moments later, a woman in a floral scarf, a Paris-based epidemiologist Ramona had met at a Geneva symposium, stood and cleared her throat delicately. "Dr. Ellis?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Pardon the interruption, but I couldn't let the moment pass. Thank you for what you just did." Her companions turned to look, curiosity sparking in their eyes. The epidemiologist's words carried weight. She wasn't just acknowledging a business transaction, but a moral stand. The woman reached into her tote and produced a business card. "If you have time later, I'd love to collaborate on that portable diagnostic project." A ripple of approval followed. A tech entrepreneur, one who had been documenting the flight on his phone, lowered his device with a grin. "That was something," he murmured to his neighbor. She didn't raise her voice, she just did it. His companion nodded, glancing at Ramona with new interest. Even the cabin crew, now reduced to a skeleton staff after Protocol 7.4b had reorganized the roster, seemed to move with extra deference. The new attendant, quietly efficient, offered to refill Ramona's water glass first, bowing her head in a gesture of genuine respect rather than obligation. Ramona sank back into her seat and allowed herself a small, appreciative smile. She hadn't craved applause, but the recognition felt like warmth on chilled skin. In her peripheral vision, she saw Clarissa's abandoned tote discarded at the bulkhead, its designer pattern mocking in its opulence. That too had changed. Clarissa's seat remained empty, a silent testament to the consequences of entitlement. A cluster of passengers whispered among themselves, recounting the stewardess's dispatch of the PR director to the galley-turned-investigation room. Phones recorded the moment, but nobody filmed Ramona now. They understood the moment belonged to her alone. Overhead, the service lights had brightened, signaling that in-flight refreshments would resume. The new attendant glided past, offering warm towels with a soft "ma'am" that carried genuine courtesy. No condescension, no forced smiles. A crisp efficiency replaced the earlier nervousness. At 5D, Ramona accepted the towel and closed her briefcase. She allowed the attendant to settle the tray at her seat first, then looked up and offered a nod of thanks. The attendant's eyes glistened with relief, as if she were no longer complicit in an unfair script. From the back of the cabin, a murmur rose. Passengers trading stories of corporate boardrooms where they'd seen similar power plays, but rarely enforced with such quiet authority. One man, mid-level executive for a biotech firm, shared with his partner, "I've sat in more than my share of first-class cabins, and I've never seen a procedure executed so cleanly. No argument, no tantrum, just policy. His partner, a marketing VP, smiled and tapped the in-flight Wi-Fi icon, forwarding a message. Dr. Ellis just changed the rules of engagement in here. Ramona's chest tightened with satisfaction, but she kept her expression neutral. She knew the eyes of the flight attendant's trainee were still on her. Every move she made was a lesson in dignity. She opened her tablet again, but instead of finalizing speaker notes, she reviewed the passenger manifest. She mentally thanked those who'd shown solidarity, and she cataloged the names of those she might call on later, for collaboration, for shared advocacy, for building the network of allies she'd always needed but never expected in high-altitude cabins. Outside the window, the Alps rose like silent sentinels, their peaks catching the early sun. Inside, a private revolution had quietly unfolded. A single, silent report had cascaded into a moment of communal awakening. Ramona pressed her finger to her temple, feeling the familiar flicker of purpose ignite. Soon, she would need to land in Geneva, step onto the tarmac, and prepare to bring that same blend of calm authority to the conference hall. But for now, she let herself savor the afterglow of justice served in the most unlikely of courts. A first-class cabin at 37,000 feet. The cabin lights dimmed as the attendant completed her rounds, and the engines thrummed with steady power. Passengers reclined, and the ambient playlist resumed at a gentle volume. But Ramona didn't reopen her tablet. Instead, she leaned back, eyes closed for a moment, breathing in that rarefied air of victory. No dramatic showdowns, no raised voices, just the quiet authority of a woman who had sat in silence, and whose silence had spoken louder than any words. By the time Dr. Ramona Ellis's Gulfstream taxied to the VIP terminal in Geneva, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long violet shadows across the tarmac. Inside the cabin, the aftermath of lockdown protocol still hummed in hushed conversations. Crew members quietly debriefing in the galley, passengers leaning toward one another in low tones, and the soft clink of champagne glasses as the new attendant made her rounds. But Ramona, for her part, sat back in seat 5D and closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a sense of calm she rarely afforded herself. She'd imagined this moment many times, the soft glow of cabin lights, the gentle turbulence of prestige, the knowledge that a simple action could reverberate far beyond these leather walls. Now, though, the real work had just begun. Rising gracefully, she gathered her briefcase and slipped off the plane, her heels clicking a confident tap-tap against the jet bridge. A town car waited curbside. The driver, accustomed to flying VIP clients to five-star hotels and conference halls, opened Ramona's door with the same practiced neutrality she'd shown backstage at countless philanthropists' galas. Ramona offered a brief nod of thanks and slid into the plush seat. As the car merged onto the expressway, she retrieved her encrypted smartphone from her blazer pocket. Geneva's hotel corridors were quiet when she arrived 20 minutes later. The lobby's soft lighting and hushed marble echoes greeted her like an old friend. She didn't need a suite to do her work. The privacy lounge off the main foyer would suffice. Inside, she settled at a desk outfitted with a small laptop, its charger already plugged into the wall. Ramona powered it on and watched the blue disc spin. A mug of herbal tea sat warming nearby, steam curling skyward. She clicked open a fresh email draft, the subject line already typed. Urgent. Review of Skylux, private charter protocols. Her cursor hovered over the body of the message. Drawing in a quiet breath, she began. To Dr. Helena Strauss, Director of Logistics, WH.CC, members of the Steering Committee for Global Health Equity. Dear Dr. Strauss, I hope you are well. I write to inform you of a serious breach in ethical standards that occurred earlier today on a Skylux private charter flight, Flight SP-1458, Paris, Zurich. As a platinum member and C-level executive advisor to the ClearDeck Oversight Panel, I submitted a formal incident report, code C-19, after being asked to vacate my assigned VIP seat in favor of another passenger, for reasons unrelated to safety or protocol. ClearDeck Protocol 7.4b has now been enacted, resulting in a temporary lockdown of operations at Charles de Gaulle and an administrative review of the entire crew. I believe this incident underscores the urgent need for our organization to reassess the criteria governing our transportation partnerships. In light of this, I respectfully recommend that WHO suspend its current charter agreement with Skylux Private, valued at USD 72 million annually, pending a comprehensive audit of their passenger services and safety compliance. Thank you for your consideration. I am available to discuss further details at your convenience. Sincerely, Dr. Ramona Ellis, CEO, Ellis Global Diagnostics, Executive Advisor, ClearDeck Oversight. She paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard. The language was precise, unemotional, almost clinical. She didn't need rhetoric. The facts spoke for themselves. With a final review, she clicked send. The email whooshed into encrypted channels, immediately flagged for high priority. Ramona closed the laptop gently and leaned back, closing her eyes. The world would react now. That much she understood. Her role was done. Back in the Skylux private headquarters at Charles de Gaulle, a glowing bulletin board in the lobby caught the attention of late-working staff. A public statement had just been released. Skylux Private official statement. This afternoon, Skylux Private initiated an internal review following an incident on Flight SP-458. We take these matters very seriously and have temporarily suspended the responsibilities of the crew involved. An independent audit of our VIP seating protocols will commence immediately. We apologize for any inconvenience to our valued clients and will issue further updates as soon as possible. Within minutes, murmurs rippled through the building's corridors. PR teams scrambled to draft a press release. Operations managers flipped through protocol manuals. Legal counsel, summoned to a glass-walled conference room, convened a crisis meeting. The email from Ramona's signature had been forwarded internally with the USD 72 million figure emblazoned in bold, a stark reminder of the stakes. Back in Geneva, Ramona sipped her tea. Her phone buzzed with a secure notification. Pending. She didn't check it. Instead, she closed her eyes, letting the residual warmth of victory settle in her chest. The following morning, a headline on WHO's website confirmed her recommendation. WHO suspends USD 72 million charter contract with Skylux Private. In response to a formal incident report involving discriminatory seating practices affecting a platinum member with oversight authority, WHO has paused its agreement with Skylux Private. The suspension will remain in effect until a full audit ensures compliance with ethical and safety standards. Simultaneously, global news outlets picked up the story. Black CEO shuts down $72.00 M charter contract over injustice. High-altitude justice. WHO halts Skylux private deal. Social media exploded with videos of Ramona's composed walk through the cabin captioned, "Silence, louder than prejudice." LinkedIn feeds buzzed with commentary from corporate leaders, applauding her integrity. In Geneva's lobby, the same epidemiologist who'd reached out on the plane greeted Ramona with a smile and a grateful handshake. The tech entrepreneur from seat 3B tracked her down, offering a congratulatory nod. Even the concierge offered a respectful tip of the cap as she passed. Ramona accepted these acknowledgments with a quiet grace. She'd never been one for fanfare, but tonight felt like a moment to acknowledge not just her own victory, but a shift in standards for everyone who boarded a VIP flight. Late that afternoon, As she prepared for her keynote, Ramona reviewed the webcast link for the WHO conference. She felt no thrill of spectacle, just a calm certainty that the audience would hear her. They would recognize that fairness didn't need fireworks. It only required steadfast resolve. She smoothed her suit jacket and stood, crossing to the window to watch the sun cast a golden path across Lake Geneva. Tomorrow, she would speak of diagnostics and equity, but tonight, she reveled in the knowledge that one quiet email had reshaped an entire system. And somewhere high above, a private jet waited to carry its passengers home, but without the complacency of silence. By the time dawn broke over Charles de Gaulle, Skylux Private's headquarters had already erupted into a full-blown crisis. In the gleaming glass lobby, scattered clusters of staff whispered in hushed tones, staring at the same bulletins that flashed across every screen. Who says spends USD 72M charter? Contract with Skylux Private. Independent audit of VIP seating Pro Tools immediately underway. In the executive suite, CEO Richard Williams stood before a wall-sized monitor, replaying the viral cabin video. His jaw was set so tightly that his knuckles whitened as he clenched them at his sides. Around him, the leadership team, COO, CFO, head of legal, and PR director shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. 5 seconds ago, Williams said, voice low and steady, we held the promise of $72 million, 0 cents revenue per year. Now, we're hemorrhaging credibility and losing the WHO partnership for at least 3 years. He turned to the PR director. Get me a press release in the next 30 minutes. I want full transparency. Crew suspended, audit launched, training mandated. Down the hall, in the employee relations office, Clarissa Holt sat across from the HR director. She'd been summoned at 6 a.m. Her designer tote still lay on the floor beside her chair, its contents half unzipped and exposed. When the HR director began to speak, we're placing you on indefinite suspension pending investigation into violation of seating protocol. Clarissa's world narrowed to the sterile carpet and the ticking of a digital clock on the wall. Indefinite suspension? She managed, voice shaking. But I'm a platinum member. I'm part of the family. The HR director tilted her head sympathetically. Part of the family means following the rules, Ms. Holtz. You'll receive full pay and benefits through your suspension, but effective immediately, you have no authority to represent Skylux in any capacity. Outside, the PR director's draft statement was already circulating. Following a serious breach of our VIP seating policy, Skylux Private has suspended the employees involved in Flight SP4488, effective immediately. We are cooperating fully with an independent audit of our service protocols and have initiated mandatory bias awareness training for all crew. By mid-morning, the media had pounced, headlines blared from digital news feeds. Skylux Private in turmoil after high-altitude discrimination. Flight attendant fired, CEO's email halts $72, 0 cents. M. Geneva jet grounded. Who really wields the power? Inside the operations center, Jessica Miller, the flight attendant who'd pressed Ramona to move, was reading the same headlines on her tablet. Her apartment bedroom, where she'd been scrolling through her phone before the briefing call, suddenly felt 2 sizes too small. When her manager phoned her at 8 a.m., voice barely above a whisper, it wasn't an invitation back to the skies. Jessica, he said, we're transferring you off all VIP routes indefinitely. You'll attend mandatory company training next week. We'll arrange a position in ground services once that's complete. She stared at the ceiling, stunned. 8 years of service, hours of champagne refills, priority lunches, personalized attention, boiled down to one misstep. She inhaled, trying to steady her voice. Is this a demotion? She asked. Temporary reassignment, he clarified. You'll earn your way back, but for now we need to demonstrate accountability. Across the hall, Captain James Reynolds was debriefing with flight operations. His 25 years of flying record meant nothing against the glare of public opinion. The operations director laid out the facts. His decision to uphold the crew's seating order under Clarissa's influence had triggered Protocol 7.4b. He would be grounded for 2 weeks. His next assignment would be as a simulator instructor for new pilots, not commanding an actual aircraft. Reynolds's hand hovered over the paperwork. For a man whose identity had been so bound up with command, the idea of teaching in a windowless room full of trainees felt like an exile. Understood, he said. His voice was even, but inside he seethed. Meanwhile, in the IT department, screens showed the WHO contract portal closing. The network log glowed with hundreds of deletion requests for Skylux's API keys, the digital equivalent of turning off the spigot. The CTO cursed under his breath. They just yanked us out of the system, no grace period. By noon, the entire staff had been notified of a mandatory all-hands meeting in the main auditorium. Employees trickled in, some in uniforms, others in business casual, filling every seat. Williams stood on stage, flanked by Ramona's name and photo on a side screen. An unspoken acknowledgement of whose call had unleashed the chain reaction. We failed, he began, voice echoing. Not because of one person, but because we let a culture of entitlement override our commitment to fairness. Today, we begin a total reset. He introduced a company-wide bias awareness program designed by Ellis Global Diagnostics in partnership with ClearDeck Oversight. Over the next 48 hours, every flight attendant, pilot, ground staff, member, and executive would participate in immersive training sessions, role-playing scenarios, interactive workshops, and unfiltered discussions about unconscious bias. The auditorium was silent as Williams continued. We will not return to business as usual. We will emerge stronger with a renewed dedication to inclusive service. Clarissa, Jessica, Captain Reynolds, you have my respect for complying, but you also have my responsibility to enforce standards. We will rebuild trust together. As the meeting adjourned, employees filed out quietly, a mix of apprehension and relief on their faces. Some had tears in their eyes, others exchanged somber handshakes. Across the room, a young flight attendant who'd been terrified of speaking up during Ramona's flight now looked determined, whispering to her neighbor, "We have to do better." Down in the operations bullpen, the CFO updated the quarterly projections. A one-time hit of $72 million, 0 cents lost, plus another $15 million, 0 cents for training and audits. The finance team exchanged haunted glances, but one senior analyst, tapping away at a spreadsheet, offered a small insight. Our customer satisfaction index is already climbing. This could pay off in the long run. By the end of the day, Skylux Private had weathered its worst PR storm in a decade, but it had begun to chart a new path. And somewhere in Geneva, Dr. Ramona Ellis prepared to take the stage, confident that her silent call had reshaped not just a single flight, but the culture of an entire airline. The morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Zurich's Tonhalle, casting a warm glow over the grand hall where the WHO's Global Health Conference was about to begin. Ramona Ellis stepped onto the stage with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly why she was here and what had happened just hours before. She wasn't the typical opening act. No flashy slide deck, no fanfare, just a poised woman in a gray pantsuit, ready to address an audience that now saw her not only as a CEO but as a champion of integrity. As she approached the podium, a constellation of spotlights followed her in gentle arcs. The hall fell silent. Chairs, creaked as attendees shifted forward, anticipation rippling through the crowd. Delegates in tailored suits and lab coats alike turned, their expressions a mix of curiosity and respect. Ramona paused, took a breath, and allowed herself a single, subtle smile. "Good morning," she began, her voice calm but carrying easily across the room. "I'm honored to be here with you all today." A ripple of applause greeted her words, polite, measured, but genuine. The moderator, a distinguished British epidemiologist, stepped up to her left. He cleared his throat and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Ramona Ellis, CEO of Ellis Global Diagnostics, who not only revolutionized diagnostic technology, but also reminded us yesterday what it means to stand for justice." At Stand for Justice, the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Ramona felt the applause like sunlight on her skin. She lifted her hand in acknowledgement, her gaze sweeping the room. There were heads nodding, eyes bright with admiration. A delegation from the African Union waved discreetly. The young student she'd met during coffee break in yesterday's VIP lounge gestured wildly, as if she couldn't contain her excitement. When the clapping subsided, Ramona leaned in slightly, resting her hands on the podium. "Thank you," she said softly. "Yesterday I boarded a plane expecting a routine flight. Instead, I witnessed what happens when privilege outweighs protocol, and how easily trust can be broken. I chose to report an incident of bias not because I sought attention, but because I believe our word must be more than a tagline on a presentation." She paused, letting the statement settle. You could hear a pin drop. Then, in the air, under the Clear Deck protocol, we saw that accountability doesn't require spectacle. It requires courage. And sometimes it requires silence. A murmur of agreement swept the hall. Ramona's mind flicked back to the cabin, the amber light blinking, the pilot stepping out, Clarissa Holtz softly obeying her escort. That memory fueled her next words. Innovation in healthcare is not solely about new machines or algorithms. It's about ensuring that every patient, regardless of background, receives equitable treatment. Yesterday's reaction wasn't just about seating arrangements. It was a testament to upholding human dignity at 37,000 feet. If we can hold ourselves to that standard in the sky, imagine what's possible on the ground. Another wave of applause, this one more enthusiastic, more heartfelt. Ramona let it wash over her before continuing. That is why Ellis Global Diagnostics has pledged $10 million, 0 cents, over the next 5 years to expand portable diagnostic kiosks in underserved regions. Technology for all, no exceptions. She clicked a remote and a slide appeared behind her. A photograph of a smiling child in rural Kenya holding a handheld screening device. The image was simple but powerful. People reaching across continents, building trust, one test at a time. As we move forward, Ramona said, I challenge each of you to look beyond the podium, beyond the press releases, and ask, how will you ensure that fairness isn't an afterthought? Because fairness isn't a luxury, it's a baseline. She stepped back, signaling the end of her talk. The moderator returned, beaming. Thank you, Dr. Ellis, for that moving call to action. The applause returned, sustained and approving. Ramona let it play out for a moment before lowering the microphone. She gave a final nod, then turned off the stage lights and stepped into the wings, heart steady, purpose fulfilled. Backstage, her COO awaited with a bottle of water and a quick embrace. You were incredible, Elise Thompson whispered. The room lit up. Ramona smiled, sipping water. It wasn't about me, she replied quietly. It was about what we chose to believe, in equity, in accountability. Elise squeezed her arm. Your story is going to resonate. Trust me. Outside the conference hall, media crews clustered, seeking interviews. Ramona took a deep breath and permitted herself a small moment of pride, not because of her company's valuation or her boardroom victories, but because her actions, performed in silence on a private jet, had ignited a conversation among the world's health leaders. Moments later, as she walked toward the press pool, cameras flashing, she felt grounded. She had started this journey believing that respect was earned with every choice. Now, she knew it had taken only one. One seat, one report, one silent assertion of what's right. And in that, she found the truest measure of leadership. By the time Ramona Ellis stepped off the conference stage, the hall was already buzzing with conversation about diagnostics and equity. But for her, the most meaningful moment arrived later that evening, back in the quiet of her Geneva hotel suite. She sank into a leather armchair, loosened her tie, and opened her laptop one last time before bed. A new email awaited her in the encrypted inbox, flagged with a small blue ribbon. From S. Dubois. She clicked it open. Subject, thank you. Dear Dr. Ellis, I'm a first-year medical student at the University of Geneva. I was seated in the VIP lounge when, you know what happened on flight SP-458. I watched everything. I've lived most of my life thinking I would always have to step aside, make room for someone else. I've learned to voice gratitude when acknowledged and swallow my frustration when I wasn't. But after seeing you stand your ground so calmly, no shouting, no tears, no self-pity, I realized something that changed me. I don't have to leave my seat anymore. I can sit where I belong, speak up when I'm right, and trust that justice isn't just a word. I wanted to thank you for showing me that. I will carry this lesson with me through every clinic rotation, every patient encounter, and every challenge ahead. With deep respect, Stephanie Dubois. Ramona paused, her finger hovering over the trackpad. Her heart warmed at the candor of the note. A young woman just starting her career, already burdened by the world's assumptions. She remembered her own early days in South Chicago, teaching herself coding while everyone else played, learning to be grateful for scraps of recognition. She knew all too well how easy it was to internalize, "You don't belong here." She typed a reply. Dear Stephanie, thank you for sharing your story with me. What you described, feeling you must always step aside, is something I've carried too. I'm honored that my actions on that flight resonated with you. Here's what I believe. You don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, silence and certainty make the strongest statements. Hold your ground, trust your voice, and let your work speak for itself. I look forward to seeing how you will shape the future of medicine. Warmly, Ramona. She hit send, then leaned back and exhaled. Across the darkened room, the city lights of Geneva sparkled on the lake below. It felt peaceful, as though the night itself were applauding Stephanie's courage. Ramona reflected on the journey she'd taken, from a girl coding on a beat-up computer to a CEO who could ground an entire airport with a single report. But more than any business milestone, moments like these, seeing someone else find her own strength, were what mattered most. The true measure of change wasn't in contracts signed or money invested. It was in the lives uplifted, the barriers broken, the quiet revolutions that began with everyday acts of conviction. She closed her laptop and stood at the window, folding her arms as a gentle breeze whispered through the slightly open pane. The Alps loomed in the distance, their peaks still glowing with the last rays of sunset. In that stillness, she felt a profound connection to every woman who'd ever been told she didn't belong, and to every ally who'd chosen to stand beside her. Tomorrow, the headlines would shift to the logistical details of conference panels and diagnostic rollouts. But tonight, Ramona savored this softer triumph. A young student finding her voice because one woman refused to be silenced in first class. It was the kind of legacy she hoped to leave, a reminder that power often speaks quietly, and that every seat, every voice, deserves its place. She turned away from the window and walked toward the bed, mind already drifting to the keynote slides she'd deliver in the morning. But as she blew out the lamp on her nightstand, a final thought settled in her heart. Every time someone tells you to step aside, remember, the seat is yours to keep.